Well, hello everybody. My name is David.
And my name's Brienne.
And this is Now Let's Be Honest, and we are here for a chosen ranking video. Specifically, we are going to be ranking the 14 Bible moments from The Chosen, which you can also find on this channel. I have actually taken the scripture moments from The Chosen, the first ever multi-season show covering the life of Christ, and I have turned those into just short little videos that cover just what is taken from scripture, and we're literally reading scripture and just put it to screen, right? If you go look at the playlist, it's called Scripture to Screen. Yeah. We're going to be ranking those 14 moments today, and that is basically all the 14 moments that they have adapted so far from the scriptures into the first 2 seasons of The Chosen, excluding all flash forwards and flashbacks, and excluding their Christmas specials, right? So there are some other moments they've adapted from scripture. We're not covering those ones. We're covering the ones that are specifically talked about in the Gospels, in the ministry of Christ. There's 14 key moments we're going to be talking about, and both Brienne and myself have our own list. Everybody's going to have a different list, right? Our list is not the right list. It's just our list, right? And so, like, the reason why we're doing 2 separate ones here is because we haven't looked at each other's lists. No. Her list is right here. I'm not looking at it yet. That's why I'm waving it in her face. My list is right here. We have not looked at each other's lists. Yeah. We have different lists. Yeah. And so, you're probably going to have a different list as well. And I expect you to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave your list in the comments. Yeah. But I want to ask you, what are some of the things that you were considering when it comes to making your list?
I thought about how memorable the scene was.
Okay.
So how much I, remembered it. And then I thought about, actual adaptation from scripture to, how accurate they were. And then I thought about just kind of, cinematically, how it looked. If it was, enjoyable. I thought about that, too. Okay. So kind of 3 different ways. Which kind of made it hard, but kind of easy, but we'll figure it out what we can do.
Yeah, sweet. See, you're a lot smarter than I am because you were able to just do that off the top of your head. I had to write down the things I was considering in here. I considered biblical accuracy, which you included. Yeah. Emotional payoff, right? So not just emotional impact, emotional payoff, specifically how it impacted the show as a whole. I tried to consider that because I think that kind of goes into the whole memorable aspect of things, because some things, if they're not as emotionally payoff stuff, I mean, they're just not going to be as memorable. As much, also, just the impact in general that it had on the viewer and on the show. And then also cinematography or execution, just how I think they pulled it off as, just a moment. Yeah. One other thing I do want to clarify here is that, speaking for myself, I can't speak for you, but I personally love every single one of these 14 moments.
Yeah, it was really hard.
Yeah. I actually had to start with my favorite one and just work my way down.
That's what I did too. I started with one. Yeah.
Because I couldn't, whenever I was just trying to think what's my least favorite one, I really couldn't think that way because I like all of them. Yeah. I think they're all really well done, so I had to start with my favorite and just work down, and then, so that's kind of where our list is coming from there. And so I'm glad we're on the same page. Yeah. But that being said, we've probably talked enough. I've probably talked enough. This is kind of how this typically goes, but I'm going to try to be concise, okay? All right, so the way this is going to work is basically Brienne's going to list her choice, and then she's going to explain why. Then I'll list my choice. I'll explain why, and we're not going to debate about it or anything. Maybe since I'm going second, I'll be able to throw some little jabs her direction, but other than that, we'll just do that. Let's hop into our ranking. Okay, 14th up. What do we got?
Okay. For my 14th one, I did Jesus Heals Simon's Mother-in-Law.
Okay, Jesus Heals Simon's Mother-in-Law. Yeah, why?
For me, mostly, that's whenever I was thinking about, how memorable it was. That one, I kind of remembered, but it was also, a really short scene, too, to where it's kind of hard for a small scene like that to have, huge payoff, but it was important, but not enough for it to be highly ranked on my list. So it was kind of something that I was out of all of them, I probably remember it the least. It was kind of short. Nothing wrong with that. Just compared to the other ones that it was up against, I was that's probably near the bottom. Yeah. So that's what I did for my last one.
Well, 14th up on my list is also Jesus Healing Simon's
mother-in-law.
Simon's mother-in-law. Yep. That's the term I'm looking for. Yes. Jesus Healing Simon's Mother-in-Law also came 14th on my list. Mainly for the same reasons. Biblically speaking, I actually really like this story because it tells us more about Simon Peter, right? It lets us know that he's got a wife, apparently, because in order to have a mother-in-law, you have to have a wife. And so I really like this story, but in the Bible, it's a very brief account. And so I remember even making my scripture to screen video, I think the whole thing's 20 seconds long.
Yeah, it's really short.
I'm pretty sure literally my outro is longer than the actual content of the video itself. And so when it comes to the emotional payoff, they've built up to it over a few episodes, but by the time it finally arrives, you're like, oh, whoa, cool. And then it's kind of just over. And so, yeah, I'd agree with you there. All right, let's move on to number 13. All right, number 13. What do we got?
I did The Lord of the Sabbath for my 13.
The Lord of the Sabbath.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's one of the ones from later in the season, right? Wasn't that like...
That's in
towards
season
the very
2.
end?
Yeah, it's in season 2, and it's towards the end. So also, clarification, I've seen The Chosen a lot more than she has.
Yeah.
Mainly because
I've watched them once through.
Yeah, she's seen them once through. You may have seen some of them a little bit more. But for me, I do this YouTube channel thing where I've broken down every single episode, and I've edited all these videos, so I'm a lot more familiar with these. But yes, Lord of the Sabbath, that is from season 2, I believe episode 6, at the very end of that episode.
Yeah.
And it's whenever the Pharisees confront Jesus and stuff. Yeah.
So I like any time that Jesus gets, like, he confronts the Pharisees. That's really fun. Whenever we go, like, further into my list, that's going to be, like, a big thing that influences some of my choices. But for this one, I feel like a lot of the ones that are further down my list, it's just ones that were, like, not as memorable to me. And that was one of them that just wasn't as memorable to me. But they pulled it off well. Like, it wasn't a bad scene. I just think that compared to the other ones, it didn't have as much of an impact.
I understand that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah. Okay, fair enough. My number 13 was actually The Healing at Bethesda from season 2, episode 5. It's kind of our second healing of the paralytic story where, it's from John chapter 5, I believe it is. Whenever Jesus goes and, he goes and finds this guy and he heals him. And the reason I rank this one so low, once again, it's really well done, and it's probably one of the best, like, from a cinematography perspective. I remember, like just all the shots are really good. I think this is the one where it's kind of impacted just because my interpretation of the story is so vastly different than the show's interpretation. And I hate that because whenever you're watching The Chosen, you kind of have to put a distinction between your own view of scripture and their view, because you have to realize The Chosen is a work of art. They are not necessarily trying to portray every single story exactly how it's found in scripture. And they change certain things around, mainly just keeping the essentials there. But that's one of those things where I really like the Gospel of John, and I really like I think I know what John's kind of trying to do there, and so I kind of disagree with their perspective of it.
Yeah.
So that's really just my own fault. So the reason it's ranked so low is not any fault of the Chosens. It's just because I have a tough time putting the distance between my own view of that story and their view of it. They make the guy look a lot more grateful than I think he actually was.
Okay, yeah. That's what I was
and so that kind of impacts things. And really, it's not even that scene in of itself that's wrong. It's really what they did with it afterwards, because it isn't even until the next episode whenever you see that he still seems really grateful and he gets like kicked out of stuff, and I'm like, so really it's almost like stuff that happens after this particular scene that affects how I feel about the actual scene itself, which once again, it's not the Chosen's fault. That's just my own thing. But yeah, so there's number 13. Number 12, what you got?
So I did The Man with the Withered Hand, which
Man
was
with the Withered Hand.
right before
The Lord of the Sabbath,
right?
Yep.
Yeah. So that was the same episode. I will say I was surprised with their CGI. That was actually like pretty good. I thought it was better than I expected. So I will give props to that. Again, it's something that's not like super memorable. And then I also just feel like whenever I was watching it, like that was one of the scenes that just felt like really lengthy and like drawn out to me for not no reason, but like than it needed to be. So I think that, yeah, that's why I put it there.
Yeah. Number 12, I also picked The Man with a Withered Hand. And I think I've got different reasons for this one. I actually really did like this scene. Just because, once again, you mentioned this a second ago, I really like moments whenever Jesus confronts the Pharisees and just confronts the religious leaders. They're always fun ones. But I think I put this one so low, mainly just because of the whole emotional payoff thing. I remember even when we were watching that episode for the first time, it's season 2, episode 6, and I remember whenever it happened, it felt kind of tacked on to the end. Because that whole episode is the one that focuses on Mary whenever she's like Mary Magdalene, when she's like going through all of her stuff. And then all of a sudden they resolve it, and it felt like the episode was coming to an end, and then all of a sudden it's like Jesus and them walking through the grain fields, and they get into the synagogue, and they heal this guy, and then they go back through the grain fields, and I was like, whoa, this is... It's kind of random.
Yeah.
Like it just seemed like I like the story, but it actually felt more like a moment from the Gospels, where like the Gospels are more episodic, where one event doesn't necessarily lead to another.
To one.
Yeah. Whereas The Chosen, they're usually really good at like tying events together. And I remember just in that episode, I was like, oh, that was kind of random. So it's a really good scene. And then also when it comes to biblical accuracy stuff, there's a few things that are a little bit off. Like, I mean, the hand is the wrong hand, which to me isn't a big deal. Like, actually, if you go watch my video in the scripture to screen thing, I flipped it. Because I flipped it to make it his right hand, whereas in the actual show, they made it his left hand, which they might have actually flipped it that time. I have no idea. So it's the wrong hand, and also in the Bible, they make it seem like the Pharisees are actually more trying to instigate Jesus, and they're purposely trying to set him up to do something, whereas in this one, they've never even met him. But once again, that's just... I need to just enjoy The Chosen as a work of art, not necessarily constantly be comparing it to the Bible. So that's just kind of the nature of, I guess, how I view things. And that is my own fault. I'm trying to step out of that. But for the nature of this video, we're ranking the Bible moments. And so I've got to rank them on biblical accuracy, you know? All right, let's move on to number 11. What you got for number 11?
Mine was The Healing at Bethesda.
Bethesda. Yeah.
Bethesda,
Okay.
yeah.
Cool. So why?
Well, one of my things was he seemed a lot more grateful. Like, I thought about that too whenever I was ranking it in The Chosen than he seems like whenever you read in the Bible. But I will say that I ranked it higher than like some of my other ones was because it gives you like a really good picture as to what's like going on whenever you like go back and read that passage in the Bible, like getting a good picture of like the scenery and stuff like that. That's why I ranked it like higher than the ones that were before. So I do like that part of it.
Yeah. One of my favorite moments in that scene is whenever Jesus like has just healed the guy, and I think he gives him a hug or something, and then he just like looks over his shoulders right into the Pharisees' eyes. Like you know that Jesus is trying to cause trouble, like because they're like looking at him, they're like, what is this guy doing? And then like Jesus like just looks at them and you're like, oh, he knew. Like he wasn't trying to get away with this. Like he was wanting them to see. And he made sure they saw before he left, and I love that because that's not a detail in the Bible, but there's just little things in the show, and you're like, oh yeah. And then that's whenever they leave, and they're like, Jesus, what are you doing? He's like, sometimes you gotta stir up the water. I thought that was a really good scene. Okay, so that was number 11, right?
Yes.
Okay, number 11. My number 11 is the woman at the well, which I felt bad putting it so low on the list because this is like the season 1 finale, right? This is like the big moment of season 1. And once again, I think it's probably just because I like this story a whole lot. And I think a lot of the ones from the Gospel of John are going to come lower for me just because that's the gospel I've worked the most with. I've worked a lot with a lot of them, but John's the one that I've just spent so much time diving into. And the way I lead Bible studies is I typically try to like get people imagining the story. And so I think I've just imagined it so differently in my head. Even though I will say it's the best adaptation of that story I've ever seen, which really is the case with all these stories. But I think the one thing that really kind of lowers this down for me is how much added dialogue there is. Because really, I mean, the story itself is already really long. And I don't mind adding dialogue, but there's certain like key moments where I'm like, it almost takes away the emotional punch of what's being said because they're trying to transition into other things that they're adding in there. Like, I'm trying to remember specifically what it was. Jesus says one thing, and in the episode, like they start having him list out all of her different husbands' names. Whereas in the biblical account, that was like one of the climactic moments in his speech. Like he says something and she's like, whoa. But instead they kind of like have it like, just like, you know, they wait a few more moments for the payoff. And I was like, like I just really wanted that punch to be there. But I still think it was really well done. But it still just came lower down on my list because of that. All right, what you got for number 10?
For number 10, I did Water to Wine.
Water to Wine.
Yeah, which is one scene that I kind of felt bad putting down low because like that's like a big story that I feel like a lot of people know. But correct me if I'm wrong. But whenever it's like in the actual passage in the Bible, people don't like leave the room whenever he changes like the water to wine. But in The Chosen, like they do leave the room. Yeah. And so that's like one of the things I think that makes it go a little bit lower because that's what would keep people from saying that it's fake. Yeah. If there were like, I mean, it would even be hard to say that it was fake for you to like fill huge canisters like that were filled with water to like wine in such a short amount of time, but still like having the people staying in there and then it changing. I feel like that's kind of an important like detail to have, and so that's why that's my main reason that it's down lower on the list.
Yeah. So. No, I definitely get that. I mean that's one of those things where I mean we'll see my number 10 is not water to wine, but I think still water to wine is one of my lower ones on the list, mainly just because of that. Just because that really bothers me, because it's like this big public thing.
Yeah.
And like nobody's in the room to see it. And I get it, because they're wanting to, they're wanting to make it this private moment where he prays to God.
Yes.
But at the same time, I'm like, you kind of want people to see Jesus performing his first miracle.
Yeah.
Just because, they even say this, like, they make a big point of this. Like, I think that the water to wine thing, biblically speaking, was his first miracle whatsoever.
Right.
But in the show, they're calling it his first public miracle. And technically,
it's not public.
It's not public. Like, really, the calling of Simon Peter was a more public miracle.
That's true.
From that perspective. But for some reason in the show, they call this his first public miracle, when in reality, he was by himself when he did it. Whereas the Simon Peter one was more public.
Yes.
Can you tell what my number 10 is? The Call of Simon Peter. Aha, yes. So I was kind of trying to segue that there.
Yeah.
But yeah, number 10 for me is The Call of Simon Peter, which once again, I feel really bad putting so low on the list, because this was actually kind of the first finale for The Chosen, because originally when they released it, they only released the first 4 episodes, and then they released the next 4. And so really, season 1, episode 4 was like the mid-season finale. And this is the first time that Simon meets Jesus.
Yeah.
He's still not Peter in the show. He's still Simon. But this is the first time he meets Jesus, and, he falls to his knees, and he says, "Depart from me, I'm a sinful man." This is one of my favorite moments in all Scripture. And once again, I think that's why it ends up so low on the list. I mean, that's the hard part. That's really the thing that, probably one of the more challenging things that Dallas Jenkins and all the creators of the show are having to face, is they're having to adapt stories of Scripture to the screen. And first off, they're doing it in a really well done way.
Yeah.
But you're also having to combat how people have already pictured it in their heads for all this time. That's always going to be a challenge there. And for me, since this is one of my favorite stories, because it parallels so well with the end of the Gospel of John, where a very similar miracle occurs. Like, whenever you compare them, I'm like, man, like, there's just little details where it's like, they don't go out into the deeper water. Whereas
it's more towards the shore.
So the commitment isn't as much, right? Like, in the Bible, like, Jesus is like, take us out into the deeper water and let's go fishing. And Peter's like, I've already been fishing all day. But then he like rows out there and he does this, and the boat begins to sink and stuff. And so there's just certain things I'm like, man, like, it's so close. But I think another thing that maybe bumps us down a little bit lower is that in the first few episodes of the show, they had a noticeably lower budget. And this still looked really good, because you have the CGI of like the fish and all that stuff, which looked really well. It's really well done, but you can, whenever you go back and watch them, you're like, okay, I can still see that, like, the budget is a little bit lower here than it was, like, once you get to season 2. But yeah, so there's number 10.
Yes.
Moving on to number 9, what do you got?
Number 9, I did Jesus Cleanses the Leper.
Okay. Jesus cleanses the leper. Why?
I liked the scene. There was more emotional payoff than there was from the scenes before, which is why I ranked it above the ones that I've already talked about. But the ones that come after, that we're going to say later, it's less memorable than those. So
Gotcha.
It's just kind of like, not bad, but it's better than the ones that are below it.
Okay, got it.
So, yeah.
Yeah, my number 9, water to wine.
Oh,
right? And
there you go.
Really, the water to wine one, it's really for the same reasons you said. Honestly, that's season 1, episode 5. So I remember I have a really special connection to that one, because I've been watching The Chosen since they only released the first 4 episodes. And so they released the next 4 all at one time. And so, like, the water to wine episode, like, whenever you watch it, like, I remember whenever they announced they were filming that episode, because I was following The Chosen. And I remember they announced that, and I was like, ooh, that looks like a fun scene. And then, like, it released, and you could tell that episode 5 had, like, a bigger budget than the first 4 episodes.
Yeah.
And I, like, even to this day, that's probably my favorite episode to rewatch, just because something about it is just very easily rewatchable. But the water to wine thing, the reason why it still ranks so low for me is because there's certain little things I'm like, okay, like, why did you have them leave the room? Like, that's like, and then also, like, they didn't fill the thing to the brim.
Oh yeah.
Whereas the Bible goes out of the way to mention that they filled it to the brim. And it seems like one of the reasons why is to make sure that Jesus didn't throw anything in the water, which obviously he didn't. But, like, there's just little details which really aren't that big of a deal, because obviously nobody in the show thought that he cheated, but like
Right.
in
It's
real
just that
life,
it solidifies that it's the fact that it wouldn't be like for skeptics.
Yeah, because in real life, people would. They'd be like,
Yeah.
okay, what did you do to the water?
Yeah, like no one can do that.
Yeah. Whereas biblically speaking, like they're like, no, everybody knew that he couldn't have done anything to the water. Like he would have had to pour water out, and then there was no water on the ground. But yeah, that's just me being like little nitpicky. But it's really well executed. Like I love the moment when he reaches in, and then like it's just dripping from his hand. Like it's like, okay, it's a pretty good moment, but still ranks fairly down there on the list. Okay. Number 8, what we got?
Number 8, I did Jesus Calls Philip and Nathaniel.
Jesus Calls Philip and Nathaniel. Okay.
And I had a hard time ranking this one low too, because I really like the part whenever it's just the two of them and they're like sitting in the room together, and that's where they do the come and see. Which is like
moment.
Yeah, and I was like, and even whenever Jesus is like confronting them, like the dialogue that they have back and forth is also really good. But then I looked at the other scenes and I was like, oh man, but I don't think I could put that one above the other ones that are coming. And so that one's just kind of a middle ground one, but it's still really good. And I had a hard time ranking that low because I really like, I feel like a lot of these ones that I've ranked too, the like scenes that are more like intimate and like one-on-one between one or two people that has like a lot of character development, that ranks a lot higher on my list too. And
well, that's typically the type of stuff you like in movies.
Yeah. So that one's number 8, and that seems kind of low, but I really like that scene. I had a hard time putting it there, but yeah, that's just kind of where it landed.
It's a really good scene.
But and that's where Come and See comes from. So like it's kind of important to the franchise.
Pretty important.
Yeah.
Pretty important stuff. I can't believe you put it that low.
I know.
Shame on you.
Right.
Number 8 for me is Jesus cleansing the leper. Okay. And this one, I was actually surprised how high I put this one, because when it comes to the emotional payoff and stuff, I mean, really, it doesn't impact the show that drastically. Yeah. But something about this scene, every time I see it, I just love it. Like, I think it's also, from a cinematic perspective, like cinematography, like, I can clearly visualize it in my head, where, you know, like, the sun is shining on them, and it's just, like, hitting them at just the right angle, where it's, like, gleaming, and, like, the way that they're holding each other, and, like, Jesus is there, and...
It looks good.
It's just, it looks so beautiful, and it just sticks in your head. To where it's a pretty insignificant moment in the scope of the whole episode, but I'm pretty sure even whenever I've done videos on that episode, I always use like the picture of them, like Jesus grasping that guy, like as the picture, just because it looks so good. Like there's something so meaningful about, like, you know, a leper who you're supposed to stay so far away from, and Jesus like walks and touches him, and like, so it doesn't impact the show that much, but it's just such a good moment to me.
Okay, I think that's the one that I did for 9, right? Okay, I forgot to mention, I also like that scene because whenever you're watching it, anytime that like it pans to Jesus, you just see his disciples behind him. Yes. And I feel like that is like a really formative moment for them, because I mean they're following Jesus and trying to like walk in his footsteps, and they see Jesus go over to this leper and touch him, and they're just sitting behind her like, oh my gosh, Jesus just like he just touched a leper.
Well, doesn't John pull
like,
a
what
knife
is going on? I think
I'm
so.
pretty sure John pulls a knife.
I think so. He's like, what in the world's going on? And you just see like this amazing moment. And the reason I just completely forgot that was it. But the reason I put it higher than some of the other ones, because it was such a formative moment, I think, for the disciples. So.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And then Jesus says, like, does one of you have a cloak? And then they all just start digging for the cloak. And he's like, I just need one. Yeah. And then Jesus is like, oh, green looks good on you. Like, or not too shabby or something. Like, it's a very heartwarming scene. I really like that one. But it still falls on the back half of the list, because that's still number 8.
I know.
But now let's move to our top 7. What is your number 7?
My number 7 was Fire from the Heavens.
Fire from the Heavens.
Yeah, and I'm going to be honest. I put this here because every time I think of this scene, I just chuckle. Like, just like...
It's funny.
How, like, passionate they were. They're like, Jesus, we're so mad at these people. Oh my gosh. And he just, like, immediately shuts them off. He's like, no, like, stop. And that's really why I put it 7. Just because that adds to memorability. Because
it's funny.
I chuckle at it all the time. And it's also a pretty small scene.
Very small.
Yeah, so it doesn't last very long, but, like, it's just funny. And I think it was a good detail that they added. Like, it adds some comedy, but then at the same time it adds to the plot. And
well, I like how they tied it into the Sons of Thunder thing too.
Oh,
because
yeah.
Biblically speaking, they never explain why they're called Sons of Thunder. Yeah. Like, typically people associate those two stories. Like, they're like, okay, I mean, those are the people who called for fire from the heavens, so it's probably them. But,
So, that's why I put it number 7.
Yeah, so...
Good scene.
It's a very good scene. I love that scene.
Yeah.
Hence why I haven't mentioned it yet, because I like that one. My number 7 would be Jesus calling Philip and Nathaniel. which you ranked lower, but that's because you're wrong. I love this scene. Like, this is absolutely well done. And honestly, after hearing you talk about it, I'm surprised I didn't rank this higher because I had totally forgotten about the come and see moment.
I know.
With Philip and Nathaniel talking. I love that moment. Like, that entire part, that's my favorite part. Even, like, I'm ashamed to say it, but even more than whenever Jesus actually calls Nathaniel or Philip. Like, those scenes to me are, like, they're decent. But Philip and Nathaniel just talking to each other and, like, Philip's excitement and being like, we found the one. Like, the one of whom the Moses and the prophets wrote. And he's like, what? From Nazareth? Like, it's so well done. I absolutely love it. And then you have Nathaniel going and meeting Jesus. And it's just, I love this scene. The emotional payoff is great. One reason, again, why I would put it so low, like a little bit lower on the list is because I think they could have gone even deeper with it. Like, I think this would have been one of those episodes which would have done well with, like, one of those, like, flashback scenes, you know, like, at the beginning of the episode. Whereas this episode started off with Nathaniel, you know, like, having his dreams crushed whenever, like, his, like, architectural thing, like, falls apart. But I would have loved if there had been a flashback scene. I was expecting it when we were watching it, because I knew it was going to be about Nathaniel and stuff. I was expecting for this episode to begin with a flashback to the time of Jacob. And you might even have something where Jacob just, like, you know, you wouldn't even have to, I know that they're trying to stay away from, like, the spectacle stuff, so you wouldn't have to have him having, like, these dreams of, like, a stairway to heaven or anything. But I was expecting him to show something about Jacob, because Jesus mentions Jacob later on when he calls Nathaniel, and they just didn't mention that, and I was like, I feel like you could have done something there to help explain why he just mentioned Jacob out of nowhere.
Right.
But still really, really well done. Number 6, what you got for us?
Number 6, I did The Woman at the Well.
The Woman at the Well. Ooh, high praise.
Yeah. So I really liked seeing the transformation of the woman, just like at the very beginning when Jesus first confronts her, and seeing, like, how short she was with him, and then by the end she's, like, running down the hill going to proclaim his name. I like just, like, seeing the arc of that. I think they did that really well. And then I also liked how, like, Jesus was portrayed, like, how he handled the situation. Like, it's just, like, really calm voice and just kind of, like, sitting there talking through. Like, I just think that they, like, did that really well. Yeah. Just kind of the dialogue back and forth and how they were communicating. It was really cool. Yeah. I liked it.
No, that is a really good scene, just, like, the way... There's the one moment, what does Jesus say? He's like, not with Messiah, or not the Messiah, or something. Like, just, and, like, you know, he's got, like, the happy tears in his eyes, and, like, he's also sweating buckets because it's really hot, and it's, like, noontime and everything. Yeah. But, yeah, it's a really, really nice scene. I feel guilty for putting it so low, but it just wasn't my favorite, you know, and so, you're just wrong. But
and I think it shows a lot of, like, Jesus' character, too, especially to, like, we've seen a lot of his interaction with the disciples, but to see his interaction with someone else, and especially a woman too, because a lot of them have been with, like, other men, so to see it, like, with a woman and his interaction, and especially with who she is, and, like, her reputation that she has in the area, which is why she's, you know, going and getting water in, like, the hottest time of the day. Just kind of seeing that shows a lot of Jesus' character.
And then you compare her to how different she is in the beginning of season 2. She's a radically different character. That's really good.
I like the character arc.
Yes. Fotina, that's her name. My number 6 is Jesus being the Lord of the Sabbath, which, once again, you ranked very low, but that's just because you're wrong. No, okay, I'm going to be honest with you. I think the reason why this one's ranked so high for me is because the landscape of Utah where they filmed this
is really
is so beautiful. Yeah. Like, the grain fields and, like, the mountains in the background and stuff. I remember, like, whenever I was editing the scripted screen video of this one, I was just, like, enjoying it because, like, this is so pretty. Like, it was hard for me to pick a thumbnail because every shot was just so nice. I was like, oh, it made me want to move to Utah. But it's like, wow. Like, so I think that might be just one reason. I was like, oh, like, I knew it had to be ranked high because I just enjoy watching the scene. But also, to go back to the whole man with the withered hand thing. Yeah. Like, I ranked that one low because to me it felt kind of tacked on to the end of the episode. Yeah. But once they tacked it on, I knew where they were heading because I saw them walking through the grain field into the synagogue, and I was like, I see where you're heading with this. And biblically speaking, the events are actually flip-flopped. Biblically speaking, it actually has the Lord of the Sabbath moment happening before the withered hand thing, and that's in every single one of the synoptic gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. But I don't care if they flip-flop the chronology. They do that all the time. It doesn't really bother me that much. It's more how the events are portrayed that really ends up bothering me. Whatever. But the Lord of the Sabbath one, I just really enjoyed that one because Jesus just like lays into them.
Yeah.
And I think that's the one video that I did for the scripture to screen thing. Typically, we actually have, certain events that take place, like they show up in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, like all the synoptic gospels. And for most of the scripture to screen videos, I usually just picked one of those accounts and read it and adapted it. But for specifically the Lord of the Sabbath one, they blended the 3 different accounts, because each of the different accounts, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, they all like include slightly different details of that like just very brief encounter, and they melded those together so well that I actually had to include some of the other accounts in there just because I didn't want to cut it out. Like I wanted to give credit to how they adapted it.
Yeah.
And so that's like the one video where I actually quoted from like multiple different gospels in the one video, and so I just thought that was really cool. And they even changed one name. Whenever Jesus says the name of the priest, they actually changed the name of the priest that he says from the biblical account, not because the Bible is wrong, but they're actually explaining to the audience a big controversy around that, and so I thought that was really cool. Number 5, what you got for us?
Mine was The Call of Simon Peter.
The Call of Simon Peter. Once again, high praise.
I think I did this one again because of like the character arc and seeing kind of Simon change from how he was at the beginning to like falling down at like Jesus on his knees. Yeah, I think that was the main reason why, because and I really like Simon Peter. He's one of my favorite characters. So I just really like that scene.
And to be fair, I think that is probably one of the first biblical moments from the whole show. Right? Because episode 1, I mean, you have the healing of Mary Magdalene, but that's like that's like a barely even a thing in the Bible. Like the Bible doesn't even technically say that Jesus is the one who healed her, but we just kind of get that implied. Episode 2 was just like Sabbath stuff. Episode 3 was when Jesus was with the kids. So none of that was biblical stuff.
Right.
Episode 4 that's the first biblical moment. So it is it's a good thing, and it is a payoff with Simon and stuff. So I guess I'll give it to you.
This time he was wrong.
Maybe. My number 5 is the healing of the paralytic, and this is talking specifically about the paralytic who's lowered through the roof, not the paralytic who was at the pool of Bethesda. And I think I picked this one just because I liked how it was pulled off. I like the emotional, like this is where there's a good emotional payoff.
Oh yes.
Where Jesus has been teaching all day, and like it's just like the whole thing is building up.
Yes.
To where they finally lower him through the roof. I think that how they lowered him is probably different than how they actually did it in real life, but from a cinematic perspective, I get what they were trying to do. I mean, you save a lot on your budget by having like a little crank there that you can like lower him down. Like I get why they did it, and it still looked really good.
Yeah.
And you're not having to tear apart a person's house or something, which I don't think they're doing in the biblical story either. I think they're just moving tiles. But that was way too much to be said. I did not need to say all that stuff. I really like the scene. Just long story short, I thought it was really cool. I like Matthew eating the grapes with the kids as he's watching this. And I like Simon Peter, like, just up there, like, in his, like, you can tell that the actor just did, like, a bunch of curls right before he, like, went into the scene, because his, like, veins are, like, popping. And he's, like, looking at Mary Magdalene. He's like, can you believe we're here? And then, like, the music pay off, and, like, Jesus, like, literally declares that he's God by saying, yeah, I can forgive sins. And the Pharisees are like, what the heck? You can forgive sins? And he's like, watch this. And then he, like, gets the guy to stand up, and it pans down to the guy's toe, and you see a little toe wiggle. And you're like, yeah! And then, like, the guy walks out, and he's just, he's just shocked, and everybody's looking, and then, like, you have this, like, interaction between Nicodemus and the guy where, like, they just look at each other. And everything about that, I'm like, this is so good. Like, season 1, episode 6, I think that's season 1, Episode 6, another one of the ones I can go back to. Honestly, the back half of season 1 are some of my favorite episodes of The Chosen. They're so good. Like 5, 6, 7, those are, I think, my favorite episodes of The Chosen. Number 4, what you got for us?
My number 4 was The Call of Matthew.
The Call of Matthew,
so
okay.
The Call of Simon Peter, and then The Call of Matthew.
Okay.
Matthew is my favorite character, so I might be just a tad bit biased. But I put both of them together like next to each other, because they're pretty close together. I don't have like a huge gap in between both of them. But I like Matthew a little bit better. I think his call's just interesting. I like him as a character, and I think it was like a defining moment. And that's the scene whenever Jesus is like dining with all of the
in the next episode, that's where it starts off, because it's immediately after that.
Yeah, and I like that part too, because that's when the Pharisees come.
Oh, I forgot. Like I put those into the same story.
Yeah.
Oh. That might change things.
Yeah.
I didn't rewatch his
videos.
videos.
Come and he's like dining with all of the, tax collectors and all the people that are lower down. And again, that's another thing that shows Jesus' character, and the Pharisees coming again. I love when he confronts them.
Yeah, it's great. Isn't it good?
Yeah.
And he, in that passage, he actually quotes the same verse that he quotes to the Pharisees at the Lord of the Sabbath thing. Right? If you knew what this means, I desire mercy, not sacrifice. I desire hesed, not sacrifice. Yeah, that's a very good scene. I love Matthew. He's so good.
Yeah, he's really cool.
Okay, my number 4 is... Where'd it go? Oh, there it is. Fire from the Heavens. Yes. This one ranks so high because, honestly, I was impressed that they pulled it off. From the beginning of the episode, I could tell that's where they were heading. Yeah. Just because I think, like this season 2, episode 1, it opens up with this flash forward. I remember we watched it on Easter. All of us were gathered together, and it was talking about the death of James, which is a biblical event, right? And everybody's mourning, and then they were talking about like them being the sons of thunder and stuff, and then like thunder crackles, and then it cuts to the opening credits, and then you open up with James and John. I was like, okay, so season 2, episode 1, James and John centric episode. And it was all building up to this. I was like, okay, what are some of the key James and John moments that they could adapt? Well, obviously they're going to tell the story of how they become called Sons of Thunder. Yeah. And there's only really one story that would help them tell that. And I was like, okay, so they're building up to this. But I think the reason this ranks so high is because this is a hard story to adapt without these guys looking like total idiots. Because honestly, the story, I think they're supposed to look kind of dumb, and really they do look dumb, but you understand how they got there. Right. Interestingly enough, they actually changed the context of this story. Biblically speaking, this actually happened like at the end of Jesus' ministry. Like this is whenever Jesus is heading down to Jerusalem for the final time. And the reason the Samaritans are disliking Jesus is because he's heading to Jerusalem, not to their place of worship. And they're like, oh, you're siding with the Jews. And Jesus is like, well, yeah. And they're like, we thought you picked us, And so James and John are mad at them because they're disliking Jesus. And so this is like right before Jesus like dies. And so they've been with him for 3 years and they're still not understanding. But in the show, I just thought they did it really well. Like the way they characterized James and John, it felt believable that these guys would jump to that conclusion. Like, like they even had like the setup earlier in the episode where Jesus is like, you'll do greater things than this. And that's something Jesus says in the Bible. And they're like, oh, I gotcha. Fire from the heavens. Like, so, and then that's also when you see Jesus mad for the first time. Like one of the first times. Like that's where he's like, you think you're worthy? Let me tell you this, you're not. And I was like, yeah, like go Jesus. Like I always like when we see mad Jesus because we see so much Buddha Jesus in all these other movies, and so whenever we get to see some like Jesus with some pep in his step and some like fire, I'm like, let's go. So there's number 4, and that leads us to
top 3.
Our top 3. Oh. These are the top 3 chosen moments. This is when we might start having to fight each other.
It's gonna get heated.
But honestly, I think we kind of have some of the same ones left.
Yeah.
And so maybe we'll be kind of good here. Maybe no punches will be thrown.
Maybe.
We'll see.
Maybe.
What is your number 3?
Well, punches might be thrown for this one because you ranked this one. Well, not too low. It was a few ago. But my number 3 is Jesus heals the paralytic. So
okay. That
was like 2 ago.
I had a tough one with that one.
Yeah.
I had a tough time because I really do like that one.
Yeah.
Okay. Why did you rank it so high though? That's what I got a question about.
Okay, so one of them is because it describes Jesus' character. There's like all these people gathered around this house, and there's just like this one person who's a paralytic and is getting lowered down, and he like just like tends to him with like all these people being around. But I think my main reason was like his interaction with the Pharisees, because isn't that whenever the Pharisees don't even say anything, and he turns to them and like he's telling them what he knows of their heart.
Yes.
Like so he doesn't even, the Pharisees say nothing to him. They're just like peering through the window, just watching. And Jesus just like turns around to them in the middle, like about to kill the dude, and he like turns around to him and is like, "This is what's wrong with your heart." And he starts like listing off all these things, just like telling them how it is. And I'm just like, that's good. And then he just goes on to heal the paralytic. And I just...
It's good stuff.
It's great. And it's in front of, like, all of these people, too. I was just like, that's bold.
Yeah, and then, like, the music really helps out, too. Like, it's like... I don't know what it was. I cannot replicate the music. I don't know why. I just tried. But it's really good. Go watch the episode if you want to see it. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good scene.
Yeah, so mostly for the Pharisees. That's one of my favorite interactions.
Brienne loves the Pharisees. She's a big fan of the Pharisees. Oh, she thinks they're the good guys.
No, I like when Jesus confronts the Pharisees.
She just likes Jesus getting mad at people. That's the type of person Brienne is. I'm kidding.
Or
Okay, number 3 for me is Jesus and Nicodemus. Wow, I put that so low? That's crazy to me. I love the Jesus and Nicodemus one, but okay, to be fair, this is top 3. And so it's top 3.
Have to see what your 1 and 2 are.
Oh yeah, you'll see. And I'll convince you. But okay, the Jesus and Nicodemus one is so good. Like, this is such a good moment.
Yeah, it is.
And I just can't get around how good it is. That's why it's in top 3. I think it's executed really well. And they took the dialogue in the Gospel of John and made it more understandable. Whereas, like, I can understand it, but, like, okay, I'm trying to think how to explain this. Okay, when you're reading the Gospel of John, and if you're actually reading Jesus and Nicodemus' interactions like a back and forth dialogue, it makes no sense, because every time Nicodemus says something, Jesus seems like he's responding to something else. Right? Like, Nicodemus will be like, tell me this. And Jesus is like, I'll tell you something different. And you're like, how did you get from this to this?
Right.
And it could be that Jesus genuinely was just like, you're not in charge of the conversation, I'm changing the subject. Jesus does that a lot in the Gospel of John. But the way they did it in the show is it naturally progressed to where, you know, Nicodemus says something from the Bible, and then they have some conversation that eventually leads to the next thing Jesus says, and they link it all together. The reason it's not at the top for me, because it is one of my favorite moments. The reason it's not number 2 or number 1 is because whenever I was editing the scripture to screen video, I had a very tough time with it, because they got so close to almost getting all of the verses in there, but there were just some parts that they just kind of skipped over, because it's almost like they didn't know what to do with that. And so I remember that there were certain moments where it's like there's like this big dialogue thing, and then I just had to like do voiceover. And I was like, oh, okay. Like, so it just like stood out to me more.
Yeah.
And so it lowered it just because I was like, oh, this is so close to perfection, because like this is such a good scene. And if you could just somehow have found a way to weave that one verse in there, it'd be like probably my number 1. But that's the reason it came out number 3. So don't throw your stones at me. You know, let he who's without sin cast the first stone. Number 2, our runner-up. What you got?
My number 2 is Jesus and Nicodemus.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so
I was thinking it was going to be number 1.
No.
Oh, I was feeling hardcore judged over here, because I was thinking I just totally messed up.
No, you just didn't put it in the right spot.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's fair. That's fair.
So, from a visual perspective, the cinematography
I didn't even mention that.
Yeah. In this scene is so good. It's just great. Like,
you just want to be on the roof with them.
Yeah, but it's like, not only it's like it looks good, but like the way that it looks like builds the suspense while of like the conversation back and forth. You're like, oh my gosh, like, I don't know. It's just, it adds to it a lot. Not just being like visually pleasing, but like adding to the actual emotional payoff of it, I would say. So that's it's like low lighting, and they just have like some candles and stuff. Yeah. You just you feel the like tints in the air. It's just, it's great. And that's just from how it visually looks. And just, I really like Nicodemus as a character, too. I said that Matthew was my favorite, but Matthew
she's converting herself.
I would say Matthew and Nicodemus, like, they're really close. And I think it's because both of them have really good character arcs, and that's why I like both of them. But this is a defining moment for, like, Nicodemus. Like, this is a big thing. This like conversation that he's having with Jesus, like, this is heart to heart. Yeah. This is some serious stuff that's going on. And he's been curious and suspecting stuff for so long, and kind of observing Jesus from behind and from the corner, and not really wanting to fully commit himself, but he's like still kind of curious. And so this is a big moment. So not only is it like visually pleasing, but to the plot and to his character arc is so important.
Well, it's been building up since episode 1.
Exactly.
Yeah, and then like the emotional payoff at episode 8, it's all the more heartbreaking. Because they actually do something. This is probably another reason why I would rank it lower, is because I didn't necessarily agree with how they concluded the conversation, because like they have Nicodemus outright recognizing Jesus is the Messiah, and basically that Jesus is God. Like, Nicodemus gets on his knees and he kisses Jesus' hand, and he's quoting the Psalms, being like, kiss the Son's hand lest he be angry. And I was like, whoa, they're having Nicodemus believe this? But then you get to episode 8 and you're like, oh, he rejected Jesus despite knowing that. It's like, wow, like, it made the punch even stronger. Yeah. And so, man, you're kind of converting me. I'm like, man, maybe I didn't rank this list very good. But
that's a good scene. It's so good. Man. Just watching that, like, I could feel the emotion through the screen. And that's just something that, one, you don't really get a lot in Christian film to begin with. And
yeah, they usually try to force the emotion on you.
Yeah, and so, but it was, like, so natural. Like, you could feel the heartache, you could feel the tension, you could feel it all. It was just...
It's good stuff.
It was good. So, anyways,
Jeez.
That's why I ranked it number 2.
Well,
Stay tuned for number 1, because, I mean, if that was number 2, it just...
Yeah, well, I'm assuming our number 1s are the same, because neither of us have listed them. My number 2, not episode 2, my number 2 is The Call of Matthew.
Okay.
Which, to be fair, both of these happen in the same episode.
That's true.
Like, Jesus and Nicodemus, followed by The Call of Matthew.
Yeah.
And so... I think I even ranked, whenever we did our episode ranking, which is also on this channel, if you want to go check that out, do it.
Yeah.
I think I actually put this episode as, like, my favorite one. Maybe.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I don't remember. But I think I might have put it up there because I love this episode. It's got Jesus and Nicodemus, then it's got The Call of Matthew. And I think I put this one so high, even though you're making me want to flip-flop this with the Jesus and Nicodemus one. I'm not sure. I don't know. I'm going to stick with my guns. I'm going to try to defend it.
Okay.
I think I like The Call of Matthew so much just because of how immediate Matthew's response is, and because they did such a good job setting this up, whereas biblically speaking, you don't hear about Matthew until this moment. But they show that Matthew, this is not his first encounter with Jesus, and I like that.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, the Simon Peter thing, they made it seem like that was his first time meeting Jesus, and he just drops everything and leaves, whereas biblically speaking, it seems like Jesus and Peter probably had interacted before, and then this is just whenever Jesus finally calls him, you know? Whereas with Matthew, they did that perfectly. Whereas, like biblically speaking, we don't have any encounters between Jesus and Matthew, but most likely they did. Like, Matthew had to have known who Jesus was. It wasn't like Jesus just walked up and was like, "Hey, tax man, follow me," and he's like, "All right, sure." So, like, I like that they showed that. Like, they showed there was this buildup. Like, to me, like, if you just walk through the Gospel of Matthew, if you're assuming it's chronologically speaking, it's possible that Matthew was at the Sermon on the Mount and he heard this and he was like, "Wow, I need to change my life." And so, like, there's buildup. And I thought the emotional payoff was so good, where Matthew just, like, the way that Paris just plays him, it's just so good. Like, he just, like, he just, like, looks at him and he's like, "Me?" And Jesus is like, "Yeah." And then he just, like, "Okay." Like, and he just drops everything and he just, like, goes and he's like, "Here, take the key, I don't care." And then I love the disciples' reactions, and, like, Simon's like,
"What?"
He's like, "But you're gonna call him?" And he's like, "I called you." And he's like, "But that was different." And Jesus is like, "Get used to different."
Yeah.
And that's, like, a big thing about the show. Like, the show is like that's Jesus' message to Simon is Dallas Jenkins and the creators' message to everybody. Get used to different. And I just love everything. And then you have this stuff followed where it's like, "Oh, so what are we doing? We're going to a party. Oh, I'm not invited to those. Oh, well, it's at your house."
Yeah, you're hosting.
And then it's followed by Jesus confronting the Pharisees at the house and stuff. So I just love this scene. But even then, I don't know if I could convince myself it's better than Jesus and Nicodemus one. It's probably because Matthew's my favorite character.
Yeah.
And so I had to put it above. But you might have convinced me. Wow, it's very rare that David Tate admits that he's wrong. But I think I might have been wrong there. But I think we can both agree on our number 1.
I think
so. Let's move to that one. All right. Number 1. This is it. Our top moment. If you've watched all the scripted screen videos, or if you've watched The Chosen, you'll know what this moment is. What is it? Well, okay, we're going to say it at the same time.
Okay. Like 1 to 3? Like a 1, 2, 3 say?
1, 2, 3. The Beatitudes. Heck yeah.
So
all
good.
right. The Beatitudes. Why is this your number 1 moment from The Chosen?
I will say, whenever I was ranking these ones, like, I didn't have to think twice about this. And that's whenever I knew that, like, that was 100% my number 1. Like, other ones, well, like, my 1 and 2, I knew that those were, like, solid. But I knew, like, the discrepancy between 1 and 2. I was, like, 100% the Beatitudes are above that. And, like, there might be other ones in here that I could, like, flip-flop them around. Maybe a little shaky here and there. I'm like, oh, I could put this one here. But, like, whenever I looked at this list, I was Beatitudes, absolutely number 1.
Yeah.
Like, from so many different standpoints. Like, cinematography-wise, it's so, like, so pretty. It's so beautiful. And the way that they have, like, the flashbacks and, like, the flash forwards, too. Because some of the stuff we haven't seen in some of the scenes, right? Yeah. So, like, the way that they incorporate that for each of the disciples as he's talking, it's so good. And I love how, like, Matthew is, like, standing off to the side and he, like, has his, like, little notebook. Because that gives, like, an insight that you wouldn't really think about, like the Sermon on the Mount and stuff and the Beatitudes, like being in the book of Matthew, and like how did that come about? How did he get that? Something we don't necessarily know, but I think it's cool how they did it. Like he's just sitting there talking with Jesus, standing on top of this hill, just the two of them, and he's just sitting there like writing it down. And not only does that, I think, add to like Matthew's character, but it adds just to kind of, I don't know, your imagination and just kind of like how it could be and just creativity. And I usually don't like things whenever it's like almost like it's like preaching at you kind of thing, but this is the one moment where I like that it's just like him just straight like preaching, just saying something, because the power it adds behind that is so important to me. And I think it's really good. So
no, I think so. I'm gonna try to. I could just repeat everything you're saying, but I'm gonna try to add something different here.
Okay.
I think one of the reasons, and I literally only thought of this as you were talking, one of the reasons this is such a good moment is because this is how you properly subvert expectations.
Yeah.
Because for the back half of season 2, they made it seem like they were building up to the Sermon on the Mount, right? And that seems like that's what they were heading. Like left and right, everybody's talking about this big sermon Jesus is preaching, and we know that they filmed that ahead of time, and so we thought this was going to end with the Sermon on the Mount. But then the episode's progressing, and you're like, there's no way they're going to cover this whole thing. And sure enough, the final episode ends with him just walking onto the stage, and you're like, what the heck?
Yeah.
And so I remember some people were frustrated by that. They felt teased. But the thing is, the climactic moment was not the Sermon on the Mount. The climactic moment was the Beatitudes.
Yeah.
Because whenever he lists these out, what you're seeing are scenes that have taken place over the course of the whole season.
It's so cool.
And it applies to all of the chosen, right? All of the main characters of the show are being portrayed in these moments. And I just thought that was so cool because the Beatitudes are already really cool.
Right.
But they found a way to tie these in, like they just planned it out so that all the different main characters, and literally all of the characters in there, they belong to, like every single one of them shows up in the Beatitudes.
Right. Yes.
Like, there's not a single one who's left out.
Yes.
And so they plan this out, and it's just a beautiful way of storytelling. Like, it just shows, like, how meticulous they are. I've never seen something like that in Christian entertainment. Like, I'm so used to seeing Christian works of art that are just, like, pretentious and preaching at you and stuff. Yeah. And I don't mind being preached at as long as the preaching is good. But this wasn't forced. And it just recontextualized everything, where you're like, you didn't realize that, like, the whole thing is they were building up to the Sermon on the Mount, and you didn't realize that the whole season you were watching the Sermon on the Mount. You know, like you didn't even have to hear it yet. It literally was just you were watching it take place. Like, with every single moment, you were seeing the Beatitudes forming. And you didn't know it until that moment, and that is the climax of the whole season. To where it's literally just this moment, and, you know, it's not an action scene. It's nothing big. It's not even a big moment like the woman at the well at the end of season 1. Instead, it's just Jesus waking, like, you know, he's just waking up Matthew. He's like, hey, I got it. Okay, how are you going to start it? And then he starts saying, blessed are the poor in spirit. And, like, and it's just so good. Like, literally, so the way that I wrote this list out is I literally just went in the order of the way that I adapted the things, like on scripture to screen, right? I just literally just copied down the titles of the videos on the scripture to screen thing. And I did water to wine first because I was just wanting to see if I could do it. And then I decided, you know what? I'm going to go chronologically through this. So I went back to episode 4 and I did the call of Simon Peter, and I was going to work my way forward. But I was so excited to do the Beatitudes that I just did that one next. Because like, it was so good. Like, it's just such a good scene. And everything about it, like the color grading of it, right? I mean, like, just like that soft, like, blue morning light on them, contrasted by, like, all the flashbacks are, like, warm colors. So you have, like, the cold and the warm, and the music keying in there. And then finally, there's this moment in the Beatitudes whenever it turns from third person to second person. Right? He's saying, blessed are those, blessed are those, blessed are those. And then he says, blessed are you. And presumably he's speaking to his audience. But in The Chosen, he turns to Matthew.
So good.
Who, if you know the story of Matthew so far in The Chosen, like, right now, I mean, he's been pretty innocent in all this. I know that, yes, he was a tax man, you know, he was like a tax collector, and I think in season 3 they're going to break this down more, and they're going to explain a little bit more of the dark side of Matthew. But they haven't shown that side so far, right? So right now, Matthew seems like the victim. And so Jesus says, blessed are you when people, like, revile you. And it's like, whoa, like, there's just this moment. And then I remember, like, Paris, he just, like, smiles. You know? And, like, he's just like, yeah,
well, I get
that was good. That was the way, like, and then he says, and he says, you are the salt of the earth. And it's such a good moment. And so that had to be my number one. Like you, there was no other choice.
Yeah.
Like originally,
100%.
like we just got back from working out and stuff, and I was trying to run through my head like what would be my number one and stuff.
Yeah.
And as I was typing this out, I had totally forgot about the Beatitudes.
Yeah, me
and
too.
as I was typing the list out, I was like, oh, that's definitely number one. Like, there's no question, because it's such a good scene.
Yeah. And I will say, another thing that I really like about it is that the way that they incorporate, like, those flashbacks and stuff, it makes you realize, like, the weight of the words that Jesus is saying. Because I feel like even whenever you, like, read the Beatitudes, whenever you're just reading scripture, like, it's easy to just be like, oh, yeah, that's what it says because you've always been taught that. Yeah. Or it's just something you kind of, like, memorize. But the way that you're seeing, as he's saying the words, it's being applied to people who you've been connected with throughout this entire show. And you're watching them through their highs, through their lows, through times of success, whenever they're really close to Jesus, whenever they're going away from him. And you're seeing how he is talking about them. Yep. Like, that's just really cool.
And
it
very few
in a whole new way.
Yeah, very few of them are happy moments.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
But he's like, this is where you're going to find the people who serve me. But, yeah.
Anyways.
Well, this video ended up being a lot longer than I intended, which is typical of us. I was actually, believe it or not, shooting for 30 minutes. But as you can see, that did not happen. But you know what? Hopefully you stuck around with us.
We had good conversations, so that's good.
So I think your list was very good. I personally like my list as well. But some of the arguments you made, they kind of convinced me. And so, you know what? We want to hear your voice in this as well. So, like I said, be sure to list your 14, just take this list of 14 things and let us know what your order would be. Rank them from least to favorite, favorite to least. Do whatever you want. Give us some extra commentary. Explain why. Convince us why you're correct. And while you're doing that, be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and while you're doing that, you know what? Go watch more videos from us, because that is always helpful. Also, if you would like to support this channel, you can do that at patreon.com/David Tate. If you don't want to do that, that's totally fine. If you're not about that life, that's okay. I still like you, and I'm glad you're here. But if you want to, some people have asked about that, and I want to let you know that is an option, and I'm always grateful for you doing that. But that being said, do you have any final things that you would like to say before we wrap up this video?
I don't think so. It was fun.
Yeah, it was a good one.
Yeah.
All right, high five. We didn't fight each other, so that's good. All right.
We did it.
Good. Well, hopefully y'all don't fight us in the comments either. Please be gracious. We love you guys. Thank you so much for watching this video. Be sure to do all that stuff I already said. I'm not going to repeat myself. And also, be sure to keep a smile on your face and don't let anybody steal your joy. Bye.
You read a verse, you sing a hymn, the money's in the plate. Sundays you mark out for him, but even then you show up late. You bought the shirt, you wear the cross, but sin throughout the week. For 30 shekels and a noose, you kiss him on the cheek.